Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Ichigo Awakens in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 6, The Promise of the Shield. Late one night. 3 people gathered together near a construction site, 2 normal everyday teens and 1 of worthy note, sitting around a small bird cage housing a small yellow parakeet. The 2 others were discussing what to do with the helpless bird, one that was apparently cursed as every owner it had died, while the large half-Mexican watched the bird with a curious gaze. There's something odd about this bird, he thought to himself, sensing another presence nearby. Maybe Ichigo will know something. Hey Chad, one of the other kids said, why don't you take him? Isn't he cute? He teased the more spiritual aware man, hoping to pawn the possibility of the curse on someone else. Hey man, that's not fair, said the other while Chad heard a strange groaning. You know Chad's got a weakness for small animals. The bird began to freak out suddenly, causing Sato to look up and see a thick steel beam falling towards them. It was times like this that he was grateful for joining his orange-haired friend in his training. With the heightened physical abilities he gained through that intense training, he caught the falling metal with little trouble. Holding the mass of steel in his hands, resting on the top of his spine, he saw a shadowy figure quickly flee the scene. I recognize this aura, he thought to himself as he threw the steel beam away, feeling no strain from the normally demanding task. I definitely need to talk to Ichigo about this. Are you guys okay? He asked his 2 friends. Yeah. Are you fine, Chad? Thank you for saving me, the small bird said in a young childish voice. My name is Yuichi Shibata. What's your name, mister? Sato, Yasutura. He told the little parakeet, unsurprised by its display of intelligence. Maybe that Soul Reaper can help too, he thought before picking up the cage and leaving for his home. See you guys the next day at school. So how was your first outing as a normal girl? Ichigo asked Rukia. They were on the roof of the school for lunch, passing by the time by cloud watching and some light conversation. We talked, had dinner, and went to bed, she quickly responded, somewhat agitated. Nothing much. She didn't want to think about the night before, that she enjoyed herself more than she'd like. Obsessing over Orium's adorable plus highs, hearing some of Ichigo's own embarrassing pest as a crybaby. She had fun, but at the cost of neglecting her duties, even if it was just for one night. She felt like she failed in a big way because of this. She did understand Ichigo's reasoning, but it still left a bad taste in her mouth. Here she was, a Shinigami many times Ichigo's age, one of the top of her class at the Shino Academy, someone that should not be having this much trouble, and she's just as helpless as she was back in the slums of the Rukon district. She can't even figure out how to drink her juice box. Here, watch, Ichigo said as he showed her what to do. There it was again, that feeling like a helpless child, but she didn't mind the teen, she liked and hated how much he was like her old mentor. It helped and it hurt. Hey Mizuru, Ichigo greeted his black-haired friend. Looks like you 2 are together again, the named Mizuru greeted. You 2 seem pretty chummy. I told you already. She's an old family friend that's staying with us for the time being. Their cover story, Rukia's family were close with Ichigo's and they used to spend time together. Seemed lazy and that no one would buy it, but they were dealing with teenagers and they usually don't care anyway. Do we look like we're chummy? Maybe, he responded with a blank expression. You do seem pretty close, and you're living together. People talk and fun rumors replace a boring truth, Ichigo. They might think you're an item. And when did I care about other people's opinion? He asked his ever-curious friend. Good point. He then turned to Rukia, who was contently watching them while sipping her drink. Hello, I'm Mizuru Kojima. He greeted himself enthusiastically. My hobbies are womanizing. Ichigo finished for him, shocking his friend in embarrassment. Careful with him, Rukia, he's a big playboy. No, I'm not. I only go after older women, Mizuru cried, not exactly helping his case. Like I said, Rukia, watch out, he said, confusing Mizuru. That's when another of Ichigo's friends showed up. Looks like Chad still isn't here. A taller, lankier brown-haired individual noted as he got on the roof. "Hey guys." He greeted his companions. "Hey Kigo." Ichigo noted to his more enthusiastic friend. Then Kigo noticed the new cutie of the group. "Oh. The hot new transfer student is here? How did this happen?" Kigo asked in loud shock and surprise. "Ichigo asked her out," Mizuru said, trying to get a little payback on Ichigo. "Ichigo." Kigo rushed to his best bud and gave a tearful congratulations. "Good job. Welcome Rukia. To this garden of men. I'm Kigo Asano," he told Rukia, unknowingly making the girl uncomfortable. "Now to celebrate with a lunch party. With sandwiches and juice?" Mizuru asked incredulously. "It's not the food that makes a party, it's the mood," he declared before getting kicked in the back. "Yo, Kurosaki." A random punk growled at the teen. He was accusing Ichigo of copying him and ignoring any claims otherwise. He was going to start a fight before getting blindsided by a giant fist. "Hey Chad." Ichigo greeted his old friend. "Did you remember to hold back?" "I did, but he's going to be unconscious for a while," he said while fishing out his own lunch. "So what kept you?" "I was almost hit with a motorcycle," he explained. "He fell off and slammed into a wall, passing out from the collision, so I carried him to the hospital." "That explains why you were late," Kigo said. Chad then showed the bird cage he was carrying. "What's with the bird?" "Hello, my name is Yuichi Shibata," the bird greeted. Ichigo and Rukia recognized that something was up almost immediately. "What do you think, Ichigo?" Chad asked his more learned friend. "That bird is certainly possessed," Ichigo answered. Kigo and Mizuru learned about Ichigo's spiritual awareness after a dare gone wrong one time and never doubted the existence of spirits since. "Should be easy to fix. Bring him by later and we'll figure out what to do." Rukia looked at Ichigo with a sense of pride that he's growing into the role of a soul reaper so well. The lost soul of the child, however, did not look so pleased. In fact, it looked scared. Later that day at the Kurosaki clinic, Ichigo and Chad were helping to carry people from the streets and into the clinic. As they neared the Kurosaki home, they were almost crushed in a sudden car accident, bringing several more people into the mix. Karen and Yuzo frantically tried to get the injured the help they needed, while Ashine was trying to get more cots and beds to house the influx of patients. "This is becoming more of a headache than I would have liked," Ichigo growled as he and Chad brought in the last 4 people. "We better get some answers about this now." Ichigo would have liked to help his family, but he did not have much in the way of human medicine and care. Even his healing Kido was pathetic compared to his sister Yuzo. All he could do was the heavy lifting grunt work and stay out of the way. Himself, Sato, and Rukia then went up to Ichigo's room with Yuichi in hand to ask him a few questions. No one noticed Karen's own shaken form as she watched them ascend the stairs. "The barrier around the house seems different, Ichigo," Rukia noted as they walked into Ichigo's room. "Did something happen?" "Yeah, there was a minor hollow attack, so Kisuk made it so hollows can't enter. Except for me, but that's just fine-tuning," Ichigo thought to himself as they set Yuichi down and sat around him. "Now, what should we ask first? Why is that hollow chasing you?" Chad said out of the blue, surprising Rukia and Yuichi. The small bird looked down in shame as he relayed his tale. How he was just a little kid, living alone with his mom, when somebody broke in and began to attack them with a knife. His mother died trying to protect him and he made the bad man fall to his own death. Some time passed after that. He ended up in the body of that bird while a monster made a deal, that if he could run from him for 3 months he would bring back his mother. Ichigo was seething after hearing this story, so much so that his head was throbbing. Chad clenched his fists so hard his nails dug into his palms. Rukia looked sick to her stomach in rage and disgust. "I'm sorry to say this, Yuichi, but that monster was lying to you," Rukia said, as gently as she possibly could given the situation. "There is no coming back to life. Once you die you can't go back to the world of the living." Yuichi could only look downcast, feeling the last shred of hope fail. "I know," he said, about to break into tears. "In a way I already knew. I just wanted to see my mommy again." They watched the bird, seeing a silhouette of a small child, breaking down into tears with pity in their hearts. Chad rose to his feet and made his way to the door. "Chad. Where are you going?" Ichigo asked. He didn't need to, he knew his friend enough to know what he was thinking here. "I'm going to find that hollow, and break him," he said very calmly, like a prelude to a storm. Rukia looked at him like he was insane. She was about to protest when Ichigo gave him the go-ahead. "Okay. Save the finishing blow for me though," he said, causing everyone to look at him. "I want to be there to watch him get dragged to hell." He grinned darkly, letting a little of his inner hollow out just enough to darken one of his eyes. Chad nodded in affirmation as he left to fight that monster. "Ichigo, what are you thinking?" Rukia cried. "He's just a human." "Rukia," he said firmly. Chad made his decision. "He'll be fine," he told her, having full faith in his friend. "Let's just perform the Kenso." Rukia recognized that Ichigo wasn't going to budge and resigned herself, slipping on her soul ejection glove to bring out Ichigo's Shinigami form. With Chad, the streetlights and moon illuminated the city, giving a sense of eerie life and stillness to the city, direct contrast from the day. He was wandering the streets in a sleeveless gray shirt, proudly displaying his arms, waiting. Waiting for that monster to show up, waiting for his fight. "You've certainly been a stubborn one, haven't you?" He heard a warped voice speak, floating around him. "Of all the people I've killed while chasing that brat, you've been the hardest one yet. You've got great reflexes and instincts, but I've grown weary of this." He kept talking while closing in on Sato, believing he couldn't see or hear him. "You smell odd, but so tasty at the same time." He got too close and was met with a large fist hitting him like a freight train, causing a spiderweb fracture in his mask and flying backwards, tumbling to a stop. "The way you're talking is annoying," said Chad, cool and collected as he glared at the bluish-green frog in a gray mane around his neck. "And you've targeted the wrong prey," he said, cracking his knuckles while stalking toward his enemy. "I'm the one that's going to make you pay for your crimes. You're no ordinary human." The hollow-called Shrieker yelled out in shock that he was hit, and so hard too. "You're not a Soul Reaper either, I'd recognize that scent." "So what are you?" Chad kept walking toward the downed hollow that was shaking in fear, completely unaware of the small creatures surrounding him. "To be honest, I don't really know myself. I'm not an ordinary human and I'm not a Soul Reaper." He saw Shrieker's expression change back to his previous cocky attitude. "But you're still just as careless," he yelled in triumph as Chad got sprayed with slime and thick leeches. "What the?" Chad wondered in surprise as the fleshy worms latched onto him. "Now die and feed me your soul," the murderer cried as he extended his tongue and acted on his name, covering the giant in explosions. With Rukia and Ichigo, the two Soul Reapers watched in their Shinigami forms, watching the confrontation between Ichigo's friend and the hollow he wanted to crush. They sent the young Yuichi to the Soul Society after assuring him that Chad would be safe and that his mother would be waiting in Soul Society. Rukia was still concerned for the giant, and to simply calm her down, Ichigo followed his friend's ribbon just in time to watch Chad get consumed in fiery explosions. "Sato!" Rukia cried out as she tried to rush toward Chad, only to be held back by Ichigo. "What are you doing, you fool? He's going to get himself killed." "Rukia," Ichigo said while keeping his attention on his friend, "we're staying out of this because Chad's my friend." He felt the air change as the hollow's doom was closing in. Besides, a blast of light and power shot out from the dust cloud that enveloped Chad. "Chad's more powerful than you think." Back with Chad, Shrieker could only gape as his left arm was obliterated by whatever that blast was. The dust slowly settled, revealing Chad, only slightly burned and bloodied, with an entirely new right arm. Wings on the sides of his wrist and a protrusion at the end of his shoulder, black with a magenta stripe going down the middle outlined in white. This new development froze Shrieker so badly that he didn't react when Chad rushed him. "I was careless," he admitted, shoving his fist into the hollow's mouth. "But so were you." He pulled out the monster's forked tongue before delivering a brutal uppercut, making the killer bite off his own tongue and fly into the air. When he came back down, Sato proceeded to stomp the arrogant hollow underfoot. Ichigo decided it was his turn, and there was something he wanted to try. "Alright Chad, that's enough for you," he said, dropping down to his friend. Chad looked over to his longtime friend and ceased his actions, leaving a bloodied and broken monster. "Besides, now Rookie is curious about that arm of yours." He saw the smaller of the two Soul Reapers scanning him, studying him. "All right," he replied, letting his right arm shift back to normal and gesturing for Rukia to follow him before leaving. "You must be pretty pathetic." Ichigo heard the hollow at his feet groan. "Having someone else fight your battles, do your job as the Shinigami." Shrieker attempted to cackle, refusing to die without some victory, any victory. His only hope for that was humiliating the Soul Reaper before him. Ichigo grabbed the near-dead hollow by the fur of his mane and threw him upright against a wall. To most it would seem like that. He told the killer. "But we learned the story about you and that boy Yuichi Shibata." Ichigo unsheathed his massive blade and stabbed into the hole on the hollow's chest, the blade facing upward. "You put my friend in a very rare mood. Chad doesn't get mad easily, and you pissed me off a little too." Shrieker watched helplessly, feeling an odd sense of dread falling over him. "So we agreed that he would beat the crap out of you, leaving you helpless for me to, well, test something out." Shrieker felt the energy around the young Shinigami change, getting darker and darker, until he recognized the feeling. "Fear. Tell me. How does fear taste?" Ichigo asked in a warped voice behind a mask. The air was filled with the sounds of sickening crunches with screams of terror and agony. With Chad and Rukia. The two were quite the distance away and so focused on their conversation that the sounds behind them was little more than background noise. "So, what's with that arm of yours?" Rukia asked, curiously touching and examining the giant's right arm. "To be honest, we don't really know ourselves," Sato replied, looking down at it himself. "One day a hollow attacked myself and Ichigo during Hakuta practice in some random field and it appeared while we were fighting." Chad told her about the pact between himself and Ichigo, how they swore to watch the others back and fight for their sake. How he was pulled into similar training Ichigo was doing. He remembered that day in particular, when his first hollow fight happened. Flashback, last year before high school. Ichigo and Sato were sparring against each other, exchanging quick and heavy blows on the other, a film of sweat covering the two combatants as they struggled against the other. The sun was setting as their fight spanned for hours with Ichigo slowly getting a lead on his friend. That's when it first showed up. Sato could barely see the monster, a hazy distortion in the air, while it was clear as day for Ichigo. A large drider asterisk with 4 arms that was yellow and green with an upside-down mask. It aimed to crush them at the same time but the two separated as the beast struck. "Chad! Run!" Ichigo called out, dodging another sweep from the hollow as it tried to grab him. Chad dodged as well, barely seeing the attack coming. "Ichigo, what is that thing?" he asked, barely able to keep his calm. "It's called a hollow," he told his friend, the need of secrecy gone in favor of survival. "A corrupted soul that feeds on other souls to ease their eternal hunger." He dove under another to get in enough to kick the large beast in the neck. The hollow staggered from the spiritually enhanced kick, but not enough to completely stop it. The hollow managed to reach out and grab Ichigo while he was still in midair. Chad watched his friend being suspended helplessly in the air and instantly remembered his promise. He ran at the beast with newfound strength and speed and broke the hollow's elbow, making it drop his friend. "Are you all right?" he hastily asked as he helped Ichigo up. "I'm fine. I thought I told you to run." "Sorry Ichigo, I can't do that." He got into his fighting stance as he stared down the hollow. "I watch your back and you watch mine. Remember?" Ichigo could only shake his head and smirk at his friend's response. "Right. I'll handle the top half, you mess with his legs," Ichigo said before disappearing and delivering kick to the hollow's chest, just above the hole. "Got it." Chad managed to keep his focus and charged at the spider half of the corrupt soul and started punching the legs out from under it while Ichigo kept flashing around its arms. As the beast stumbled on top of Chad, Ichigo flashed to the back of its neck and got ready to throw it over his shoulder as Chad punched the beast over top himself. The hollow lay stunned as the duo prepared for the next strike. "Let's go." Ichigo yelled as they ran toward the downed hollow, red energy gathering in his fist as he prepared his finishing blow. Right. Chad followed suit, finally seeing the monster before him in all its horror, as did the same unconsciously. With a roar of triumph they slammed their fists into the now obliterated corrupt soul in a torrent of energy. So that's what a hollow looks like? Weird. They finally relaxed in their victory, ready to collapse. Yeah, nasty. He said before realizing Chad's arm changed. What happened to your arm? Chad finally noticed his arm changed forms. I don't know. They looked at each other for a few seconds before they decided to ask Urahara. Present day with Chad and Rukia. Not even Urahara knows what it is for sure. Chad told her as he finished his story. At that same time beam of light shot up as a large pair of doors with half a skeleton each on their faces. The door of hell? Rukia told Chad as she watched the gates open to welcome its new victim. That monster is getting his just punishment for his crimes. They heard the demented laughter as the hollow was ran through on a giant blade, curiously missing more of his body, as the former serial killer was dragged into the burning abyss. Ichigo finally came by after the deed. I'm going to bed. This is enough for one day. Before making his way home, Chad said his goodbyes as well while Rukia joined Ichigo. Chapter 7, Asking Out. Urahara's shop. It was the next day, another day of living a human life in a world she had no place residing in. However, with her only link to her home of soul society being the orders she is given, she still had to make do with supplies. Thankfully the former captains residing in Karakura seemed to have a consistent supply of necessary materials. Here she was now, loading up on those materials. Okay, will that be all Kukaki-san? Urahara asked his current customer, filling her request form of Soul Reaper equipment and supplies. Not yet. She replied, getting to what she felt was the most crucial piece. I need some Jikunga for Ichigo. Assuming you have yet to give him one. She did have a few complaints about her body, but the former captain did tell her prolonged use might bring up some bugs in the Jigai. That was handled a while ago. The eccentric inventor told her. But he doesn't like using him. Why? If he does, he could just slip out of his classes no problem if a hollow shows up during school. He wouldn't even need to worry about his body then. She fished for more information about her stubborn and forced partner's life. All he said about that soul was, he's an annoying useless pain. He told his customer. Trying to avoid telling her about the soul in question. Fine, she responded, I'll get him to tell me then. She turned to leave before remembering some details from the earlier night. By the way, that boy Sato said he was one of Ichigo's training partners and he has some strange power. Anything else you'd like to tell me? She glared at the jovial man. Urahara brought out his fan and laughed. Ichigo has some good friends. Let's leave it at that. He remembered that talk with Chad. Even now he didn't know everything about it, just that it was hollow-based Reishi in power. Everyone involved agreed to keep the nature of his abilities a secret for obvious reasons. She had to confront a certain strawberry about certain details. Karakura High. So that's the end of that, huh? Kigo asked Ichigo after they discussed the exorcism of Chad's new bird. Yeah, poor kid didn't have any friends when he was alive. So we filled that void with a day of fun. Ichigo responded, drinking his juice while Mizuru and Chad feed the little bird. They agreed to not relay the real story. Those two didn't need to be dragged into that world of ghosts and monsters. Ichigo. They heard someone cheer happily. They turned to see Rukia, finally at school, waving at Ichigo and smiling. Hey look, it's your girlfriend Ichigo. Mizuru said casually as the petite Shinigami made her way towards them. What? Kigo cried out. Ichigo, when did this happen? He said, tears comically running down his face as he pleaded to the young Soul Reaper. How could you go around, picking up chicks, without me? Get me a date too Ichi dash. Kigo was promptly quieted with a swift punch to his chest as Rukia finally reached her target. What do you need, Rukia? He asked her. I just have some questions I need to ask you in private. She said, smiling, and acting cutesy to keep up appearances. Ichigo noticed some of the subtle signals she was trying to send to him to recognize that she means Soul Reaper-specific questions. "Alright, let's go," he said, following her to a private place they could talk. "Well, there they go," Mizuru said, still relatively unfazed by the sight before him. "Ichigo, you traitor!" Kigo screamed out. "How can you call yourself my friend and not hang with the guys? You trade." He was hit with the juice Ichigo had on hand that he threw. "I don't think Ichigo can possibly help you get a date, Kigo." "He could try." Kigo grumbled from the ground. Chad was just watching in slight amusement. "With Ichigo and Rukia." "So what is it, Rukia?" he asked as they got to an empty area of the school. "Kisuke said that you had an artificial soul already," she said, skipping to the heart of the matter. "May I see it?" "Really?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "Fine." He reached inside his bag and pulled out a cartoonish yellow lion stuffed animal. "This is Kon. Kisuke gave him to me when I was 10. He told me how Soul Reapers use Jikengan when they need a quick eject and to keep their cover." Rukia took the stuffed doll from her teammate and inspected it. "I didn't like the dispenser, so I tried this instead. By the way, what's with that whole soul candy thing?" he asked, confused by that name from so long ago. Rukia adopted an undignified blush, embarrassed by the reason behind the name. The Shinigami's Women Association didn't like the name Jikengan. Said it wasn't cute enough. She didn't like the name either, but she was a representative of her clan. She needed to present herself as such, and not give Ichigo more reason to think less of her. "Well, he's no chappy," she said, looking the lion in the face, letting her inner girl take over. "But he is pretty cute." She caved, hugging the doll to her chest. "Your boobs may not be big, but they're really nice too, Rukia." A muffled voice spoke out. Rukia heard it coming from her chest and threw the doll up while screaming. Ichigo, staying calm, reached out and caught the perverted spirit. "Nice catch." "Shut up." Ichigo growled at his irritating stuffed animal. "Ichigo. What the hell is that?" she screamed, pointing at the lion in his hands. "Like I said, this is Kon," he said, like it was the simplest thing. "He's my artificial soul." "Yo," he greeted with a raised paw. "I don't like using him because he's a pervert. I'm worried about what he would do in my body." Ichigo remembered the last time he left Kon in his body. That was a bad time. "Now I get your reluctance," Rukia said, finally calming down. She never thought putting a soul in an inanimate object would yield such results. "Why do you keep him then?" "Because he's useful to have," he told her. "When he recognizes a threat, he becomes a decent fighter. I usually leave him with my sisters because they haven't a full grasp on their abilities yet." Rukia remembered when that was an idea Soul Society had, but it was deemed inhumane and all such souls from that project were destroyed. Just then her phone was going off, signifying new orders. "Ichigo." "I know," he said, unzipping Kon's back and pulled out a small green pill that he swallowed. The two separated and Kon began stretching in Ichigo's body. "Been a while since I was in here," he said. "Remember Kon?" Yeah, lots of scowls and no flirting or peeping." He dismissed his boss as the two Soul Reapers left to find their targets. Would it kill him to try to live a little? He asked no one in particular. "Now, let's see." He quickly checked the time. "Almost time for the next class, better get moving." "Ichigo's class." "Agreed. We'll ask him together," Tatsuki said as she and Orium finished their lunch. After warding off a certain red-haired lesbian, the two could coordinate their plans without a hitch. They agreed to share Ichigo and would start with a simultaneous date between the three of them. The date would be at the Donkanonji show, coming up that weekend. They felt this was the chance to make their move. Kon came through the door and the two friends walked right up to him, prepared to ask when Orium noticed something. "Hey, where's Ichigo?" Tatsuki and Kon were surprised by the question. Kon was trying to come up with an explanation while Tatsuki took a second glance to confirm her ditzy friend's claim. Orium was surprisingly observant, their mutual crush. "Yeah, you're not Ichigo." "Where is he?" Khan pulled them both out of the classroom and into the still empty hallway. Okay, first question. Khan said as he got their attention. What makes you think I'm not Ichigo? Tatsuki was glaring at the imposter of her crush when Orium explained why. You seem like a complete and utter waste of a character with no importance or impact to the series, she said with a completely straight face. Khan felt the words stab into him like arrows. Fair enough. Next question, he said after pulling out said arrows. How much do you know about him? I know he's spiritually aware, Orium said. Are you related to this Soul Reaper stuff? Tatsuki asked, causing the two to gape at her. She shrugged and told them she overheard Yoruaki-sensei talking with someone about Ichigo. Well, no use hiding it now, Khan reasoned. Yes, Ichigo is a Soul Reaper. I'm an artificial soul filling in for him while he's doing his job, and he probably won't come back for the rest of the day, he said while sensing another hollow. Damn. Tatsuki cursed. All that motivation wasted. They were really nervous but were determined to power through it when Ichigo showed up, but it wasn't Ichigo in the end. What? Were you going to ask Ichigo out? He asked, causing them to blush furiously in attempt to deny it. In response, using some of his enhanced reflexes from his many upgrades, he snatched up the show tickets they had. All three together? Khan asked, impressed and pissed at the same time. He may not like Ichigo too much, but he alone practically saved his life and gave him his own to live. Sure, he was the servant of the Kurosakas, but they never made him feel as such. He had a life debt to his master. I'll accept in his stead, he said, grinning while writing on one ticket. I owe Orium and Tatsuki one date. And trust me. He smiled and winked. He'll definitely go. The rest of the day passed as such. Normal and uneventful, until Ichigo found that ticket. Later that night in Ichigo's room. Khan. He yelled at the stuffed lion sitting on his desk, going over the notes Khan managed to make for him. What's this thing about me owing Orium and Tatsuki a date? What? You told me to be you and I thought you would agree, Khan said in his defense. Two hot chicks together at once, what straight man would say no? He said in an overdramatic fashion. A busy Soul Reaper, that's who. He growled. What's this? Exclaimed Ashine and Yuzo, who heard him from downstairs. My son has a date with two girls at the same time? Oh Masake my love. Our boy is becoming a fine man. Who are your girlfriends Ichi and I? Yuzo gazed at her brother. Is it Tatsuki and Orium? She met Orium a few times and they got along while Tatsuki came to the clinic quite a few times when she started Hakuta training. Karen. Ichigo's got a date. With two girls. Didn't peg you for a womanizer Ichi and I. Karen said. I don't have any dates and I'm not a womanizer. Ichigo yelled in his defense. If you don't want it, I'll go. Khan said. You are not going anywhere near them. Ichigo roared at the lion. Do you hate them? No. He yelled, insulted. Do you want them to think that? No. He said, more subdued. So you'll go with them? Khan confirmed. Yes. Ichigo said, feeling defeated in a way. Good. It's official. Khan said with Ashine ending the group chat on Ichigo's phone. It was then that he realized that he could have talked to them and declined the invite gently like a proper man. Khan. He growled, more mad at being tricked than anything else. Relax, I'll probably never do anything ever again and be replaced by a much more interesting character who is way more upbeat than me and would be a great contrast for you. Chapter 8, The Date and the Foolish Exorcist. Karakura Hospital, June 17th. 6 years ago she almost died for him. 6 years ago, he learned about his potential. 6 years ago, he swore to destroy the Quincy King with his own two hands. 6 years since she last opened her eyes. 6 years since he last heard her voice. 6 years since she fell into a dreamless sleep, hanging on to life by a thread. These were the thoughts of two sons in particular, visiting their mothers in a specially made room of the hospital. The one day that their teacher would permit them to skip school, if only for a scarce few hours. For the simple pleasures of comfort they could find. A trace of a smile or a slight grip of the hand, letting the sons know that they are still alive. Anything real than the constant beeps and air blowing of the machines they were connected to. 6 years Ichigo. Uriah said to his cousin, overlooking his own sleeping mother. The effects of time and atrophy being waylaid by a device Urahara made to keep their bodies active enough while unconscious. Both Connie and Masaka looked virtually the same as when they fell asleep so long ago. Only 2 years left, and we still have this Aizen fellow to be wary of. I know Uriah. He told his cousin. Aizen is after whatever Urahara made and he claims to have hidden it in a safe place. Chances are Aizen will be a concern before Jahabak, in which case I can hopefully get the help of the Godi I-13. It was a long shot, but they all decided to choose when a ready threat was presented to show the captain commander the whole issue. Right. I just think we should step up our training. Uriah was doing his father's training to the letter, but he was yet unable to join Ichigo on the front just yet. Urahara was fixing up new equipment for him to use in order to exorcise the hollows instead of outright destroying them. Unfortunately, this was actually a difficult process that Urahara was all too eager to make possible. As one of the few real challenges he's faced, he had to split his time between training his students and preparing Uriah's upgraded equipment. We can't bring overly unwanted attention to ourselves, Uriah. We're already pushing it as it is. Rukia told him that she was reaching the time limit of how long she could be in the living world, and no matter what she tells Soul Society, they would come investigate. Best to prolong that as much as possible. Let's keep as we are until necessary. That's time, boys. They heard a stern voice tell them. They turned back to see their fathers, Ryukin and Ishine, waiting for them. You two should get to school, Ishine said as he walked into the room. And Uriah, Ryukin said, catching his son before he left. I'll push you when you are ready. He assured his son, letting him know he should have more faith in his father and allies as well as himself. Understood, he said before the cousins left to attend their final classes. So I heard you have a date, or is it dates? He said, trying to put up the image of an average teen in spite of reality and his own apathy. I think it counts as dates. Ichigo groaned, still somewhat annoyed that he was forced into this situation. He had nothing against Orium or Tatsuki, but he would have preferred to face them personally. This would give a blow to his image, but he also couldn't afford any distractions for when the battles come. As such, he confronted them again and accepted the date like a man and of his own volition. He just wished that it wasn't to some hack spiritualist medium. He also hoped his teachers won't find out, but he was a realist in that regard. As if his dad clamoring for his new daughters and grandkids wasn't bad enough. Urahara Shoten. Ichigo, cried his dark-skinned martial arts master. Why? I thought we raised you better than this. You should have 5 girlfriends at least. He was doing everything he could to ignore Yoriyuki while Tessai was finally teaching him the 90+ level Bakudo spells. Now Yoriyuki, we can only teach him so much. Urahara tried to calm his old friend. Ichigo's still just an innocent kid, we can't expect him to be an instant playboy. He whipped out his fan. But he is well on his way to that, isn't he? The two friends laughed as Ichigo failed an incantation, distracted by his teacher's antics. Well, I could give that final push, the mischievous cat said as she pulled her student's hand to her breasts. What do you say, Ichigo? She sang seductively into his ear. Shall I teach you the pleasures of a woman? This time the spell exploded and pinned Ichigo's hand in place while tying everyone else up. Tessai growled. Ichigo, you can't allow distractions to affect you like this. He scolded his student as they freed themselves from the botched Bakudo. Maybe you should sleep with Yoriyuki, if only to help your concentration. He suggested casually, making Ichigo turn redder than his namesake. I'm in. She cheered, already starting to pull off her top while Kisuk went to get a camera. Don't I get a say in this? Ichigo cried, backing out of the store slowly. Never. I called on your first a while ago. She yelled, looking at him hungrily. What purpose does this serve? Ichigo asked. Stupid slapstick. Kisuk said while he set up the camera with Tessai holding a reflector board, with Hinta and Yururu behind Ichigo with rope and tape. Fortunately, Ichigo was prepared. Bakudo number 21, Senki. He yelled while pushing off the ground and into the vacant lot, shielded in a massive cloud of red smoke. Get back here! Yuriuki yelled as she managed to find and tackle her quarry, only to see him fade. She was positive she managed to grab him, but it turned out to be an illusion. She wasn't sure whether to feel pride or annoyance. He was progressing splendidly, but it was rare for anything to escape her. Nice job, Ichigo. She complimented. But that certainly wasn't Utsasimi, so how did you do that? Kurosaka Clinic. What did you do to yourself, Ichi? Yuzo cried while applying her healing Kido with Rukia's to heal her brother's legs. I pushed myself too hard with an experimental move. It was a mix of his Hirin Kyoku with Shunpo and that skill his hollow Zanjutsu called Sonito. The result was an overexerted body with most of his muscles torn from the pressure and friction. He almost fully recovered from the attempt and could get back to the important matters, his upcoming date. This is your first date, Ichi. You need to impress. Stated Yuzo firmly as herself. Karen and Rukia rummaged through his clothes to find a proper outfit. He's going to watch a hack, he can go normal. Karen retorted, knowing that Tatsuki wouldn't really care. And you're here because? He asked Rukia, who proceeded to put Chappa bunny ears on him. For my own entertainment. Ichigo responded by throwing her out of his room. His sisters ended up with getting Ichigo a casual get-up after a few arguments. Remember, Ichi. You have to join the fun to enjoy it. Yuzo told her stubborn brother before crossing her arms over her chest and laughing. Bo ha 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 ha. Ichigo looked over to Karen for help, but she could only shrug. Now you. No. Ichigo. It's your responsibility to make sure they enjoy it. She scolded, pouting at her older brother. We also want you to have fun too, Ichi. Karen said, sitting next to her brother. You should take some time off. Relax. We just want to see you happy. She leaned against him while Yuzo was giving him puppy eyes. Ichigo sighed in annoyance that he made his little sisters worry so much, gesturing Yuzo to get closer before wrapping his arms around the twins. Fine. I'll take it easy and have fun, you two. He reassured his sisters. I'm supposed to worry about you two, not the other way around. He said, making the siblings giggle as they fell asleep in his comfortable embrace. Karakura's abandoned hospital that weekend. The place was filled with people, either to see the show or setting it up for the live broadcast. Ichigo found out that Orium and Tatsuki knew about him being a Soul Reaper and what his training was for. They were now using this time to talk about whether this show had any validity to its name, Ghostbust. So is there really a spirit here? Orium asked, eating some candy they brought from Urahara's shop where they met. Feels like it. Ichigo said, feeling a familiar malice that was born from a hollow. Probably an earthbound spirit. One that's tied to a particular location. One of the stage crew got too close to the old building and angry screams filled the air, surprising Ichigo's dates but not himself. You can't tell until someone trespasses though. Orium and Tatsuki were suddenly more glad that Ichigo decided to come, latching onto him for a sense of security and warmth. Don't worry, he's not a hollow. Not yet. He thought, looking at the man wrapped in chains, the hole in his chest almost opened. His cries of greed gaining no sympathy from the young Soul Reaper. Listen up, everyone. The broadcast had begun, hyping most everyone up for the show proper to begin. Here he is. The spirit medium of the new century. The messenger of hell. Dawn. Kanonji. He yelled, bringing everyone's attention to the helicopter the supposed spiritualist jumped out of. The spirits are always with you. He cheered, free-falling before using his parachute. The crowd roared in approval, while a scant few who could truly see the spirit remained silent. Urahara and Yoriuki silently came up behind their disciple to soothe the worries he might be having. Don't worry, Ichigo. He said as carefree as ever, bringing the trio's attention to the exiled Soul Reapers. It takes a long time to become a hollow on one's own. I'd give him another 6 months, tops. He told Ichigo, making the substitute feel somewhat better. Until Orium asked a very good question. Urahara-san? Is he supposed to be doing that? She asked worriedly, pointing at Don Kanonji who was stabbing his staff into the demi-hollow's chest, trying to force it open. All the experienced spiritually aware beings present let out a sigh of annoyance. "No, Inu-san," he replied before pushing Ichigo's back with his cane, ejecting his student's soul. "No, he is not." Ichigo wasted no time rushing over to stop the man from making a terrible mistake. "Maybe you should just go to an arcade next time," the shopkeeper suggested. "Yeah." The girls agreed. Ichigo made it between the demi-hollow and the tan-skinned spiritualist and managed to throw them apart, surprising the audience. "What's this?" the announcer cried out. Don Kanonji was thrown back. "What kind of spirit is this?" "Hey!" the shaded man yelled out. "What's the big idea? You're just a ghost." He was surprised, this had never happened to him before. All the spirits he exorcised before were all chained down, but this one was free of those chains. "So you actually can see spirits?" Ichigo said to the man. "Tan-skinned, fanning dreads, rather thin mustache, and he dresses like a dorky superhero but without the spandex." "Of course I can," he retorted. "I'm the premier spiritualist of the new century." Then he came to a rather absurd conclusion of Ichigo being a fan despite being dead while the Soul Reaper chose to focus on the turning hollow. Unfortunately, he was too late. The damage was already done as the earthbound soul exploded. Don Kanonji announced his success. Ichigo kept on the lookout for when the hollow appeared. "Not out of the woods yet, Kanonji," Ichigo told the faux exorcist, grabbing his attention before putting to the roof of the building. The hollow appeared as a humanoid frog of a sickly green color. "With Tatsuki and Orium." "You're Yuki-sensei?" Tatsuki asked her teacher, feeling a hollow's dark energy for the first time of her life. "Ichigo will be alright." "Right." Yuki looked down on her other disciple before breaking out a confident grin. "Don't worry, Tatsuki," she said, wrapping an arm around the young girl's shoulders. "A hollow like that is nothing for Ichigo. Have more faith like your friend here." Tatsuki looked over to Orium and saw fear and unease, but not concern. Orium could feel Ichigo would be alright. She was so embarrassed, she should have known Ichigo better than that. She watched her future boyfriend with renewed confidence and felt gutsy enough to cheer him on. "Yeah. Kick that monster's ass," she yelled out, giving Orium confidence to do the same. "Go. Win." Orium squealed. "With Ichigo. The cheers of the fans give me strength to purge this evil before me." Kanonji yelled out proudly, causing more cheers as the hollow descended. Ichigo could only smirk as he heard his friends and family cheer for him instead. The hollow was swiftly descending on the two with Kanonji bravely challenging the monster while Ichigo stood off to the side a little, waiting for a chance. When the hollow came close enough to snap the foolish human in his jaws, Ichigo then delivered a spinning kick into the hollow's back. The result was a gaping hole in the building with Ichigo nailing his landing. "Let me guess," Kanonji looked at the boy in amazement at his display of strength. "You're not going to run no matter what I say, are you?" The man looked at Ichigo in shock and disgust. "Run? How can I run? Do you know what my ratings are?" he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "1 in every 4 households watch my show and most of those viewers are children." A silence washed over the crowd as they listened. "That means I have to be brave. I have to show courage. I have to be a good role model." He lost his showman attitude and felt more like a person rather than a celebrity to the audience at that moment. "Sure, I get scared, finding dark and malicious spirits like these. But if I run, what would that tell the kids? That there is no hope? I can't allow something like that." There was a pause of silence before the crowd roared in approval, seeing Don Kanonji in another, better light. More than just a fun program, but as someone who tries to bring smiles no matter what because it's right to do. "That means your only fault here is ignorance," Ichigo said, keeping the exorcist's attention while the hollow made its way back to them. "Hado number 1, show." He pointed at the mindless hungry beast and shot a pulse of force at the creature, sending him to the back of the hospital again, and collapsing the front gate in the process. "Really need to work on that. Come on, there's something you need to see." he told the spiritualist as he blasted the rebel away with another show. Very well, he said, recognizing that whatever this boy was going to show him was for his eyes only. They entered the abandoned, decrepit hospital, searching for the monster that was their prey. Ichigo unsheathed his Zanpakuto and took a few experimental swings. Damn! It's too cramped in here, he realized before gripping Zanjutsu with both hands. I guess now's as good a time as any. His blade began to glow as he started to focus on his Ryutsu and blade. Everything all right, partner? Kanenji asked, feeling a camaraderie with the youth. He gaped in amazement as Ichigo managed to turn his massive blade into a pair of katana, one in each hand. He twirled the blades in hand to get a feel for the new style he put upon himself. Amazing! What is this boy? He could only think to himself as his world began to expand with every moment he was with Ichigo. He's coming! Ichigo yelled as the wall burst out with the hollow charging at them. Kanenji closed in and caught the hollow's mouth open with his staff. Ichigo quickly got into its space and made 2 swift slashes, severing the hollow's limbs. The monster roared out in agony as it collapsed, having no support to keep it upright. The beast lay before the two, helpless as Ichigo made the final blow through the hollow's mask, ending its cries and struggles. Great job, partner! Kanenji cheered, celebrating what he felt was a hard-won victory. Ichigo did not allow for this man to live in his ignorance anymore. Don't celebrate, Kanenji, Ichigo said, pointing at the disintegrating hollow. The form of the monster dissipated, revealing the broken man inside. Wait. The exorcist said brokenly. He was. I thought He was stunned, feeling everything he thought he knew crumble around him. Hollows. Ichigo said. Corrupted souls of those that lost their hearts, had their chains that kept them peaceful removed. Kanenji gasped in shock, remembering every time he believed he purified a lost or bad spirit, breaking chains he thought were their torment. He's made monsters out of innocence. What have I been doing? He asked, not to Ichigo but to himself. Tears flowing from his eyes as his unintentional crimes came down on his shoulders. You've been acting out of ignorance, Ichigo said, making the near-broken man look back at the true exorcist. I don't blame you for your actions. You never knew nor had a chance to know. You wanted to be a hero so you became one. How can I still be a hero? He demanded. How can I possibly call myself that now? Ichigo shrugged and brought them both back to the cheering crowd, hailing their hero, Don Kanenji. I say keep doing what you've been doing. Ichigo snatched a pen and paper and began to write. Only now, you do it right. He gave the spiritualist the note with his quirky teacher's address. Go to this man before attempting anything like this again. He'll help you on your road of redemption. He gave the man one last smile before disappearing in a burst of speed back to his own body. Kanenji looked down at his note and felt himself change into a new man. Bo ha 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 ha. He laughed out, cherishing the crowd's roars of approval. Thank you, boy, he thought while announcing his full triumph. You've shown me what I really need to do. I won't let you down, my friend. A few days later. You still put too much energy into it, scolded Tessai as Ichigo finished up his training with the Kido Masters. I almost shudder to think what might happen if you go all out. He's right, Ichigo, Kisuke drawled as he rose from his nap. You want to make allies of the Soul Reapers, not kill them. You need to be able to hold back more. The building stayed up, didn't it? Ichigo shot back at his teachers, referencing the abandoned hospital from earlier. No, it collapsed after Tessai and I stopped keeping it upright. The resulting shockwaves from his Hado did so much structural damage the building was going to fall apart with him inside. Ryukin was quick to purchase the land and start another project there. Anyway, don't you have another date with Arisawa-san and Inu-san? Kisuke teased as Ichigo ran out the door, passing a man in a trench coat who entered the store. Kisuke smiled at who would become another regular at his store. So, how can I help you? Don Kanenji. Chapter 9, The Archer Returns. Sometime later. After the events at the abandoned hospital, the show Ghost Bust made some changes to the methods made in sending the spirits to the afterlife. The very same changes and the statements he made had turned Don Kanonji into the #1 TV star in the entire nation, and he never forgot the lessons Ichigo had taught him. Tatsuki and Orium demanded a redo on that date Ichigo had agreed on as well and went to the arcade. Tatsuki, feeling bold, imposed a challenge that whoever won in the games they played gets a kiss from the person of their choice. Ichigo never won once, whether by choice or being bad at games. He left his girls feeling very giddy. Things did get brighter for him after winning them a tiger and lion plushie as a group of punks tried to pick up his dates. His home clinic got a few more customers after that. The falling hours were coming fast and Ichigo, being the gentleman he was, escorted his ladies to their homes. "Thanks for Ichi-kun, Ichigo." Orium cheered, holding her stuffed lion. Ichigo won for her, as he and Tatsuki told her good night in front of her apartment. "No problem," he said, less enthusiastically. "I'm sure my reputation can recover after this. I just hope you had a good time." She responded by leaning in next to him and planting a swift kiss on his cheek. "I really did." She smiled before walking toward her brother, who was smiling at Ichigo and shooting him a thumbs up. In his mind, as long as it made Orium happy then so was he. He knew Ichigo and Tatsuki personally and had faith in the two. Ichigo weakly responded, still a little unsure about his feelings in all this. He was supposed to prepare for a coming war and polygamy was kind of frowned on in the present day. The cheers from Zanjitsu, Urahara, and his father didn't help manners in the slightest. Now how about the brave protector escorts their date home? Tatsuki teased, latching onto Ichigo's free arm and grinning the whole time. "Am I protecting you or the other way around?" he joked, as they proceeded to head for Tatsuki's house. They spent the time in silence, reflecting on the day and their activities. He liked Orium because she was so upbeat and happy, she made him happy because her attitude was so infectious. Tatsuki just understood Ichigo on that guy level, she was active while Orium was passive. A good contrast and would probably work wonders if he needed a shoulder to lean on or a much-needed kick in his ass. He may not like the idea of being a player but he also knew they weren't giving him the option either. "Ichigo?" Tatsuki asked after walking for a while. "Why didn't you tell me before?" She felt hurt. Ichigo used to talk to her about everything but she had to find out about him being a soul reaper? About him preparing for a war since he was a child? How could he not talk to her about that? Wasn't she his sparring partner with Chad? Wasn't she his childhood friend? Did all that mean nothing? "This doesn't concern you, Tatsuki," he said solemnly. "You're a normal girl, you should worry about normal things." "I do," she countered. "I worry about my friends and want to help." She glared at him as he avoided looking at her. "Does Chad know?" Ichigo remained silent for a bit. "Yes." She pushed him away and slapped him. "What makes him so special?" She was developing tears. "He gets to know the big secrets but I can't." Ichigo wasn't looking at her, he didn't want to hurt his oldest friend. "What about that study partner of yours? Does Uriah know?" His silence was all the answer she needed. "Why?" "Because you're powerless," he said told her. "Chad can shoot off blasts of Reishi like a cannon. Uriah is from a long line of people that specialized in fighting hollows." He grabbed her by the shoulders and looked deep into her eyes. "You have been learning the same martial arts that I have but you're not fast enough to keep yourself safe, strong enough to overpower these opponents, and most importantly," he held her to his chest, tightly, "I would never forgive myself if something happened to you." Tatsuki just stood there, trapped in his arms, feeling his worry. She relaxed after a bit. "It's not fair." She wrapped her arms around him in a more comforting manner. "When did I become the one that needed protecting?" They stayed like that for close to an hour before finally separating. They parted ways after that. Tatsuki to her home, Ichigo to just wander about. He felt terrible telling Tatsuki she was powerless, that she couldn't help him. But he also knew it was true in his other life, she was more of a liability. Charging into fights she would not be able to win. "That really was mean of you to say." He heard a soft mewl coming from his female mentor, in human form for now. "She does want to help you. She's not like Chad or Uriah or even my sisters," he responded, a little despondent after the talk with his oldest friend. She doesn't have any power, or if she does then they would have manifested by now. He said as he began his trek to his home, back to an overly curious father and sister while the other one retains a semblance of respect for privacy, a dutiful Shinigami that'll invade his privacy at the slightest hint of a hollow, and his empty bed. Don't be so sure, Ichigo. Yuriuki thought as Ichigo left. When a girl is determined, they're going to achieve their goals. As Tatsuki is not as powerless as you think. She grinned to herself, remembering the events of her last spar with her fiery disciple. How there was fire in her strikes. There are certainly more surprises for us down the road. She was thinking this while keeping her focus on her student's butt. I will have that ass, Ichigo. Oh yes, I will. Soon Ichigo faded into the distance and she herself made her way back to the shop. Midday in an ally. It was the third time that week. He had exams, he tries to study, Rukia gets a call, they roll out, then nothing. No hollow, no soul reaper, just a lone soul. Now things were getting fishy. It was an unspoken rule between the cousins that they study by themselves during exam week in order to create a sense of competition in order to push the other. He never beat Uriu in the top spot once. This time was no different, aside from the constant interruptions because he doesn't want the guilt of Rukia dying because she still hasn't recovered enough of her powers. Now here they were, on another wild goose chase with no hollow to fight in a pathetically annoying soul. Once was strange, twice was a coincidence, third time's a pattern. While Rukia was fiddling with her receiver, Ichigo went to get answers. His first clue was a Reishi trace in the area that felt vaguely familiar. Hey! Spirit! He yelled at the overweight doe-sized middle-aged spirit of a man missing a chunk of his side. What happened here? What did you see? He demanded roughly. He was squeaking out, still terrified from the near-second death experience before crying out, "Thank you." He leapt toward Ichigo with tears streaming down his face. I was so scared I almost peed myself. His cries were met with a crushing stomp on the back of his head as Ichigo tried to emphasize his irritation. What did you see? He punctuated with grinds on the fat schmuck's head. I was so scared, I had my eyes shut the whole time. He whimpered out after Rukia pulled Ichigo off of him. After he said that, Rukia wanted to stomp the miserable soul from existence. Ichigo had another question for his theory. If he was right, then he might have some choice words with a certain relative. Did you hear anything? He surprised both Spirit and Rukia by the oddity of the question. Anything like a whistling sound. Rukia looked at the teen in confusion while the Spirit actually seemed to remember something. Yeah. The Spirit said tentatively. Yeah, there was a whistle. After that the monster disappeared. There were only so many people in Karakura that could fit that description, and a quick glance to a building's roof gave him all the answers he needed. Ichigo, Rukia asked her scowling teammate, what is it? Ichigo's response was to swiftly perform the Kenso on the unsuspecting soul before heading home. Nothing important. I have to study for exams, so leave me alone. He growled, trying to make it seem like he was more in a bad mood because of the waste of time and not anything else. After what happened to Soken, he wasn't too trusting of Soul Reapers when it came to his other side. After exams week. Ah! Finally! Kigo cried out as he slumped over his desk, a long week of tests and exams finally over. I'm dead. You certainly look it. Mizuru quipped, looking just as terrible himself. These exams are important if you want to get anywhere in life after high school. Ichigo told them, darkly remembering Ryukin lecturing the boys after one mishap on a test. He vowed to never relive that nightmare. That's easy for you to say. Kigo whined with comical tears running down his face while pointing at him accusingly. You study all the time, you nerd. He wasn't exactly wrong, he does study a lot, and that was his excuse when he's needed to make a getaway from Kigo when he trains his power. Why don't you help me study, buddy? He cried out, flinging himself at Ichigo, who punched him the face. Study on your own, you idiot. He growled out. High school was especially rough on him. People picked fights with him, most of his teachers stigmatized him, even with good grades they just seemed to hate him. The only reason it's known that his does good in school is because his teacher Oka-sensei doesn't discriminate and congratulates him on his schoolwork in front of everyone as she did with everyone. It did help his image a little, but some teachers still hated his reputation and attitude. Now where is he? He asked himself as he entered the hall, all the students in his grade gathering around a bulletin to see their ranking. Third in the class. Good job, Orium. He heard Tatsuki say, patting her friend on the head and making her giggle. Tatsuki saw Ichigo coming up before turning away, either in anger or shame, he did not know. Orium turned to see their mutual crush before pouting angrily at him. She took Tatsuki by the arm and walked away, surprising everyone. I don't think I've ever seen Orium angry before. The common students began gossiping about what could possibly have upset the normally bubbly girl they all know and loved. Ichigo felt terrible, all those feelings from that night rushing back at him in full force. So far no one was blaming him, so the knowledge of them dating probably didn't get out, or Chad did something to quell the talks. At the moment, not his problem. He took the time to look at the class ranking, where he was 5th in the grade. Ryukin made the requirement for the cousins to be in the top 10 if they wanted their Quincy training. It was a good motivator. He glared at one name in particular before finally sensing him. He gave a quick glance to Chad, who seemed to understand what he wanted, before slinking off to meet the Quincy. On the rooftop. Damn it! The bespectacled teen cursed. It wasn't his grades he was angry about, nor any mishaps in his sewing. The object of his ire were the 2 small crosses in his hand. One silver while the other was black, but both had a skull insignia. These were the new Quincy crosses, created by Urahara to exorcise the hollows instead of destroying the souls outright. With them he could do as the Quincy, as his grandfather wanted. There was just one problem. I know he said it would require more fine control, but this is ridiculous. The new bows took his own Ryatsu as well as the ambient Reishi around them to work. He was not used to the method and was training it as much as he could. Why was he angry? Urayu. He forgot to tell his cousin and he dropped a few places while he himself was in 2nd place for the grade. Something you forget to tell me, cousin. Ichigo growled at his dark-haired relative, neither dropping their glare at the other. Unfortunately, yes. He said before tossing his cousin the black cross. Urahara finally finished my gear and I had to test mine out. Ichigo caught the cross with ease before examining it for himself. It needs you to draw on your own Ryatsu and the surrounding Reishi to function. Pushing and pulling as he said. Ichigo slipped his new cross on his wrist before focusing. He managed to get a cloud of Ryatsu perpendicular to his hand before letting it dissipate. Yikes. Ichigo panted as the effort pushed him mentally. That is rough. This was going to require remastering Quincy arts all over again. So if you have the ability, why didn't you reveal yourself to Rukia? Urayu readjusted his glasses, having the light mask his eyes. That's because. There was a pause between the two. I couldn't think of a cool entrance. He said dramatically, trying to make it sound more impressive than it was. Ichigo's response was to give his cousin a violent nudge. My rank dropped 3 places because of this Shinigami crap. He growled while Urayu tried to escape his torture. I didn't need these pointless chases if there wasn't a hollow. Ah. I'm sorry. He tried to plead for forgiveness. He was still grateful for his cousin. If it wasn't for him, he'd probably be an antisocial loner. Ichigo stopped when they sensed another hollow. Let me. Urayu suggested after Ichigo let him go. Is Kukaki-san going to be a problem here? He asked, walking to an opening in the fence as a hollow appeared in the distance. Chad should be keeping her busy. Ichigo answered as Urayu summoned his new spirit bow. It had a black body with a bright blue aura. Should be fine then. Urayu said as he took aim. It was a millipede-like hollow, searching around for a meal. He shot a flying black arrow straight through the neck of the monster and making it disintegrate, particles flying into the air as it faded. Kisuke did a fine job with that. Ichigo said, more impressed with Kisuke than his cousin for a skill he already had. Yeah, but I can't make a solid bow anymore. Urayu informed as he shook his hand. It's going to take forever to get to that level again. You can worry about that after meeting Rukia. Ichigo said, getting ready to leave. Tonight. Just appear out of the shadows or something. He left his cousin alone. Tonight, huh? He said, thinking back on their cover story. It wasn't exactly wrong, but he also didn't want to lie about his family connection either. Later that night in some random street. Again. Rukia growled as they ended up with another order but no hollow to show for it again. Is this thing busted? She looked at her soul pager in anger, trying to figure it out. Ichigo remained silent as he dragged his body out and went back inside, patiently waiting for the Quincy to arrive. And why are you so quiet about this? She yelled at her partner accusingly. You were so mad earlier, so why are you silent now? Impatient, isn't she? Uriah stated, coming out of the shadows finally. He wore a form-fitting white uniform that seemed like a mix between Chinese origin and Catholic robes. How unprofessional of a soul reaper. He stopped before the two. Good evening. Ichigo. Kukaki-san. Rukia was about to ask before Ichigo spoke first. Uriah Ishida. Speaking coldly to his cousin, trying to match his tone. They both sensed another hollow and Uriah quickly dispatched it while Rukia responded to her pager. Just as quickly as it appeared, it was dead. Rukia was watching the Quincy in shock, wondering what new development this was. You see Kukaki-san. I am Desh, he was about to tell her before Ichigo got behind him and pulled his outer robe over his head and tied it shut, trapping both the Quincy's arms. His name's Uriah Ishida. Ichigo told Rukia while his cousin struggled to free himself. Like Chad, he's also an empowered human. He's a Quincy. Uriah finally freed himself of his confinements and glared at the hybrid. I thought you said I could make an entrance. He growled through his teeth. And you did. Ichigo affirmed. I never said I wouldn't ruin it. Pay back for not telling me earlier. Why weren't you paying attention? I had tests to study for. The two bickered while Rukia was looking completely lost. Excuse me. She yelled before the two teens could start exchanging blows. Can I get an explanation? Sure. Ichigo said. We met when we were kids. We trained together for years. Uriah continued. We promised to fight together. We've been close ever since. Aside from the occasional slip-ups. They finished together before attempting to return to their childish squabble. Rukia still had questions. But, what's a Quincy? She asked the boys. What do we look like? Ichigo scoffed. Your personal encyclopedia. Uriah said condescendingly. Ichigo then began talking about the irritations he's dealt with since Rukia showed up in his life, making his cousin sympathize. Shortly after that, Uriah and Ryukin were invited to dinner after Yuzo called Ichigo asking if he was going to have dinner. The rest of the day passed by without Rukia getting any answers from the two, leaving her one choice. The next day at Urahara's shop. The Quincy and the Ishidas huh? Tessai was setting out the tea for the three of them as Rukia tried to get information. Ichigo isn't telling you. Urahara teased the noble. Yes. She responded, taking a sip of her tea. He said he'd be my partner, but he wouldn't say anything about them other than he and Ishida were friends. Not surprising. The Shinigami let Uriah's grandfather die years ago. He said, surprising Rukia. The Quincy were a clan of spiritually aware humans who specialized in destroying hollows. Complete destruction, not cleansing them at all. Rukia paid rapt attention to the former captain as he explained a lost history most did not know. The Shinigami tried to convince them to leave the business of hollows to them, but the Quincy refused and they had to be all but wiped out. The Quincy threatened the balance of souls that the Soul Reapers worked to maintain, and they did this massacre as a last resort about 200 years ago. The survivors tried to live in peace while some still advocated an alliance of sorts. Soken Ishida was the last Quincy elder to support that idea. Through Uriah and Ichigo, however, that dream could become reality. He told his favored customer about the new Quincy devices he augmented to allow the Quincy to act as true allies to the Shinigami instead of a danger to the whole world. Ichigo was probably protecting his friend, waiting for you to see him in a better light. Rukia had to question what she knew about Soul Society again if such things happened. A kind innocent man, who wanted nothing more than to help, left to die because of the inaction of the Soul Reapers? Refusing allies because of a grudge they tried to end? What was going on in her life? This is all so strange. She whispered, shaking from all the weariness. You're a new Soul Reaper, just out of the academy. Urahara told the petite girl. This is heavy, classified stuff. Just then, Rukia's pager went off. She picked it up and was frozen in terror. What is this? Karakura Hospital rooftop. Your dad was surprisingly lax about the test scores. Ichigo said to his cousin as they studied and practiced their archery skills. Uriah was shooting the target bullseye while Ichigo was going over notes. They would switch after emptying the quiver. As long as we're in the top 10, he's fine with us. Uriah said before shooting his intended target flawlessly again. Just as Uriah prepared to make another shot, Ichigo felt something strange in the air. Barely a tenth of a second later they sensed a swarm of hollows appear in the city. Hundreds of them. Uriah, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Despite my best wishes, I unfortunately am. The air was soon filled with hundreds of ghostly roars, crying out in hunger. Chapter 10, Fighting Together. Karakura Hospital rooftop. It was like something from a nightmare. Every passing second brought more and more of those mindless beasts. Tens turned to hundreds and hundreds to thousands as they continued to pour through holes in dimensional space, driven by their hunger to seek and devour. From partially humanoid to completely beastly and monstrous, each wearing masks that one would see in nightmares. The cousins could only stare in horror as they descended on the city. As they finally began to register what was happening, they began to panic. Oh God! Ichigo managed to finally speak. Yuzo. Karen. His worry immediately going to his sisters, still young, still fresh, still weak. An appetizing treat for a hungry hollow should one find them. We have to go get them. He was about to run off before Uriah held him back. Ichigo. He yelled out, barely restraining himself from rushing off to save the twins. I'm just as worried about them as you are, but you have to stay calm. Always the thinker, always the planner, always looking out for his hot-headed brother-in-arms. You are still in your human body, and unless you can control your bow immaculately, you can only use Kido, and those incantations take quite some time. Where is Rukia? They had to get him in spirit form and fast. He was stronger then, more powerful. Ichigo took a few deep breaths to calm himself and to focus on his wayward partner. She just left Urahara's, he said as he noticed her speed, and she's already in spirit form. They sighed in frustration. They had to ensure that Ichigo's body was safe and Urahara's shop was quite the distance away. Time was not on their side at all. What's really bothering me is who used the hollow bait. This surprised Uriah as both he and his father disposed of all the hollow bait they had years ago. Did Aizen get the formula, or was the Vandenrijk making a move? Our enemies are probably trying to test us. See how strong we are. He hypothesized. Which means we can't afford to go all out. But this still exposes us. Ichigo said as he remembered a few others. Chad and Rukia can handle themselves, cons with Karen and Yuzo, and I can only hope they'll ignore Tatsuki and Orium. He had faith in his allies in battle, and Kon was designed to bodyguard the girls in that body, but Orium and Tatsuki had greater ryotsu than most people, so there was still a chance they could be targeted. The two warriors felt trapped. No matter what, there was loss on their end. Trying to figure out the best plan, left the boys paralyzed. This was their first real battle. Not some random weak and stupid hollows that are spread apart, but a veritable army coming against them. They realized that all the training they did nothing to account for the very real fact that they might fail this day. Standing around moping is not going to help anyone. A familiar firm and deep voice. The boys turned to see their Quincy teacher stride out to join the boys in witnessing the terror before them. Yes, if you fight you will give your enemies the chance to study you, to learn your strengths and weaknesses. He said, voicing one side of their dilemma. However, you can just stand back and let this carnage happen. He said, as fact. Not possibility, fact. Doing so will keep you both under the radar for some more time. But such an act will lead to many injuries and death to the living and the dead. He readjusted his glasses as his two students turned to face him. None of us trained you to second-guess yourselves. Yes, your enemies will learn valuable information on you, but this will teach you something about yourselves as well. He glared at the boys, making them feel the weight of the next decision they would have to make. Will you be cowards? Or will you fight? Neither teen moved for seconds that passed like hours. Suddenly the two threw themselves over the side of the building, skating away on a flow of reishi. He smiled in satisfaction. Those two will be your downfall, Wywak. He thought as they disappeared. They've gotten much faster. He turned and began preparations for the influx of new patients he would be having. With Urayu and Ichigo. So what's the plan you're going for? Urayu asked as he followed his cousin, flying through the air on the flow beneath their feet. Ichigo had general ideas, Urayu did the fine-tuning. We're heading to Karen and Yuzo. Ichigo replied as they skirted past some hollows, occasionally striking out with fists or small-scale Kido. Khan's current body is strong but mine is better. He'll take them and my body back home so we can focus on the fighting. Ichigo felt his phone vibrating in his pocket, despite the pressure and friction pressing on him. He looked at the screen, slowing down only slightly to prevent destroying the small device. It had only one message from Kisuke. Level 1 restraints, lifted. Ichigo was just given permission to use higher-level Kido and attacks. He knew just the set to use for this. With Chad in the market district. This isn't good. The muscle-bound giant thought as he sensed all the hollows pour in like rain in a storm. Despite the coming battles he would face, Chad remained very calm about his situation. Ichigo and Urayu are already on the move. If I had to guess, they're going to Yuzu and Karen. He guessed, knowing his best friend's protective brotherly instinct would push in to defend his precious sisters and Urayu would watch his back. Guess it's up to me then. He decided as a group of hollows surrounded him. What a tasty-looking soul you are. He heard them speak amongst themselves. A large pale purple one with a mask like swirling wind currents reached out to crush him in its massive hands. Sato grabbed onto the hollow's hand, turned, and threw it into one of its comrades around him. The explosion of dust and debris scared what remaining bystanders there were into running for their lives. While the hollows themselves tried to figure out what had happened, Chad jumped up to one of them with his empowered arm and smashed the beast's mask, killing it without a blast of reishi. You want me? He asked, glaring at the hollows as they managed to get back on their feet. Come and get me. He growled before turning and running away. The hollows just stared in confusion before Chad flared his Ryutsu, making them act on instinct to catch their prey. I have to get to a safe place to fight. He thought as he remembered what Yoriyuki and Urahara told him. Your fists have a lot of power in them, Sato. He heard the voice of the shopkeeper repeat in his mind as he stopped running once he reached the empty park. Great heavy attacks, but you must be careful using it in the city. One of the hollows reached out to grab him and Chad caught its hands in his own before tearing its arms off and slamming his head into the hollow's mask, crushing it. All it takes is one mistake. Yoriyuki's voice rang out in his ears as he fired a shot at another hollow, destroying its head. And you could cause great damage to a lot of innocent people. He jumped onto another hollow's beastly mask and jumped off with enough force to shatter the white bony structure. So you should learn to control the amount of power you put into it. He charged up his arm again, making it glow in bright light, before shooting his fist out rapidly, blasting out a rain of his reishi blasts like a machine gun. The ground beneath became littered in small craters and the dissolving bodies of hollows unfortunate enough to get caught in the blast. He landed on the ground just in time for more to show up, drawn in by his still flaring Ryutsu. Ichigo, I'll draw as many as I can to me. He thought to himself, possibly trying to send a message to his friend. Get to your sisters, then come here. I'll hold out till you show up. He charged at the next hollow, ready to continue the long fight ahead. Unaware of the growing tear in the sky. Back at Karakura High. Tatsuki was still thinking about what Ichigo said to her. She was a normal girl. She was always more into guy things, standing out from the girly girls but never fully one of the guys. Compared to Ichigo, her boyfriend she's sharing with Orium, she's normal. A normal human with nothing to prove otherwise than seeing spirits. Sure, she was stronger, faster, and more skilled, but only because she was being taught by Yoriyuki. She wanted to prove him wrong, that she's not some helpless girl. But how? Tatsuki. Breaks over. She heard a voice yell out inside of the karate club's room, telling her to return for her next match. She wanted to help him, help carry that burden he put on himself, but she remembered how she felt seeing her first hollow. She was afraid, frozen with unease. She put on a brave face with Ichigo because she refused to let him see her as weak. That same feeling she had now. Tatsuki. She turned to see Orium, still around after her own club activities finished. After their date with Ichigo, they had a private talk over the phone and she told her about what happened with Ichigo. Orium had that way with people, she could tell when something was wrong and no one could hide it from her. That was also the first time she ever seemed mad at anyone. She never raised her voice and never said a mean thing, until that day. What is it, Orium? She asked her oldest friend before they heard glass breaking. They rushed to find the source, but there was nothing. Just broken glass and people arguing. They and a classmate named Chizuru ended up being the ones that had to clean up the mess. She kept complaining about having to help clean, while Tatsuki and Orium couldn't shake off the unease they were feeling. Why do I have to help? The perverted lesbian whined while she and Tatsuki swept up the dangerous shards of broken glass that littered the area. She received no response as Orium was watching the sky tier and Tatsuki was on guard. What is up with you two? Again nothing. Tatsuki. If Orium keeps spacing out I'm going give her a nice rubdown. She teased, knowing she'd react furiously to keep her from Orium. Chizuru. Tatsuki said as she got up, looking toward the open field. Why are you here? She had to get Chizuru and Orium out of there. Why don't you and Orium leave early? She tried, but the monster was impatient. There was an explosion of dust as it dropped down before them. A spider's body with large crab claws and a snarling mask was the beast's appearance. Orium, run! Tatsuki yelled out as she grabbed Chizuru and bolted. They managed to get Chizuru through the door and into relative safety, but the hollow shot out a mass of webs and barricaded the door, trapping Orium and Tatsuki alone with the hungry monster. All unaware of the more dangerous creature watching them. Tatsuki. Orium was terrified. Here they were, face to face with monsters people have trained for years to decades to prepare to fight these monsters. Ichigo was already fighting them and treated the beasts as an annoyance. What should we do? All Tatsuki could think of at that moment was how right Ichigo was. She saw Chad's arm and she watched Uriu and she knew Ichigo's power. She had none of these. She kept hearing Ichigo's voice in her head, saying those words she hated. You're a normal girl. You're powerless. Over and over like a mantra chant of insanity. Not fast enough. Not strong enough. Fear became doubt, doubt in herself and her abilities. But doubt gave way to annoyance and annoyance gave way to anger. She growled as she clenched her fist, nails digging into her skin and drawing blood. Normal. Powerless. She shot herself forward like a bullet, charging headfirst at the monster that was set on eating them. Shut up. She growled in response, narrowly dodging a swipe from the hollow's claws. Shut up. She slammed her fist into the hollow's mask. Shut up. 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 She kept punching away at the hollow, Orium screaming at Tatsuki to run away while the beast tried to understand what was happening. This was still a fairly fresh hollow, not smart enough to recognize a growing threat as the girl continued to punch away at it, or was there something else about it? Yes, I'm normal. I want to hang out with my friends, worry about my grades, and get a little lovey-dovey with my boyfriend. She raged, her knuckles bleeding from punching the hollow's bony skull with no protection. And yes, I'm powerless. I don't shoot things out of my hands like Chad and Uriu. She felt a fire build up inside of her, something she felt after a brutal spar against her teacher, Yoriyuki. But I. She punched it again, cracking the mask. Am not. Another punch, cracking it further. Helpless. She threw a final punch at the hollow, covering it in a burst of fire. The air was filled with its sudden death cries as it dissolved into nothingness. Suki. She couldn't hear Orium's voice. She did it. By some miracle she actually did it. She killed a hollow. Atsuki. She wasn't naive enough to think that this meant she was anywhere near to equal foot to Ichigo, but this was a first step. Now she had to train it, and survive the day. Tatsuki. She finally heard her ditzy friend call out her name. Tatsuki. Orium wrapped her arms around her tired friend and began crying, letting go of all of her worry and relief. Can you lighten up, Orium? Tatsuki groaned out, the rage and adrenaline seeping out of her as her exhaustion took over. My arms are killing me. She didn't really care. Orium was safe, they were safe. Looks like I made the right decision. They heard a withered, vile voice speak out. I felt that girl's strength and wanted to see if she was a threat. The two friends looked to see some strange tentacled hollow, floating above them and watching them, hungrily. Now that's she too tired to fight, this will be easy. The hollow flared out her tendrils and shot things out of her forehead, breaking through the glass with ease. Seconds later Orium and Tatsuki were surrounded by the other students, each one with a seed sticking out of their bodies. Now die and feed me your souls. She screeched before laughing. Tatsuki could only glare at the hollow in rage. Orium. She called out to her friend, getting between her and the hollow as the zombified students closed in. Run. I'll hold them off. She said, despite the feeling that she broke her hands. Don't be crazy, Tatsuki. Orium pleaded with her friend. I can't just abandon you. But you can't fight either, can you? Tatsuki stated. She could feel Orium's power for herself, and if anger brought out hers it might just help Orium. Just run. You'll only slow me down. Orium was staring at Tatsuki in shock. Her best friend just said she's useless. Is this what she felt when Ichigo told her that? Is Tatsuki really going to push her away? That being said, I'm not sure how long I'll last. Tatsuki said as the possessed mob got closer and closer. Tatsuki. There was a yelling. They all looked up and saw the red-headed lesbian yelling out to them. After you pass out, I'll teach Orium all sorts of naughty things. She yelled out in a perverted tone. Tatsuki forgot about her immediate danger and vented her annoyance, throwing rocks and knocking out the zombies that got too close. That should do it. Good luck, you mannish freak. She whispered from behind her cover as Tatsuki kept throwing things. Chizuru. You keep your grubby hands off Orium. You hear me? She yelled at the lesbian while the hollow was shocked that it was being ignored. Quit ignoring me. It howled as it pelted Tatsuki with her seeds, striking her in her thigh, shoulder, and stomach. You're supposed to be wallowing in fear and hopelessness. How dare you ruin my fun? It cried out indignantly. The question now is to how to make you pay for this. Tatsuki glared at the monster before her, filled with defiance to the creature. Why don't you strip naked and let these boys have their dash? The hollow was interrupted again as Tatsuki slammed her free fist into her shoulder, just below the sprout on her body. The result caused another blast of fire to pass through her and destroy the hollow's seeds. She also broke her bones in the process, but she made her point. She refused to let that freak have its way. Like I told so many others. Tatsuki said, glaring at the hollow, making it worry. I will crush anyone who hurts my friends. Orium watched her best friend and remembered each time Tatsuki helped her, how everyone else helped her when she couldn't help herself. She relied on her brother, she relied on Tatsuki, she relies on Ichigo, but no one relies on her. She doesn't have anything to offer her friends. She hates that, and she's sick of it. Well, maybe I want to protect you once in a while, Tatsuki. Everyone was now watching the Auburn princess stand up. I'm tired of always being protected. I'm tired of always having to hide behind you. How about I do the protecting for once? The hollow became livid. I said, stop ignoring me. It shot off more of its seeds before a flash and whirlwind appeared. By the time the dust settled, something cut through one of its tentacles and there was a glowing triangular shield. I'm talking to my friend. She growled, glaring at the monster that attacked them. Shut up, you disgusting freak. Tatsuki was surprised by the level of aggression Orium showed. Earlier she was just passive with Ichigo, but this was something else. She could only stare at Orium like she was a completely different person. Orium turned back to fight her and was about to continue. Now I'm dash. Orium, where did that shield come from? Tatsuki asked, directing Orium's attention to the glowing barrier. There was a silent pause as Orium seemed to finally notice it. Oh wow! She exclaimed in childlike wonder as the points separated and joined their flying siblings. What are they? How should I know? Tatsuki asked as the sprites flew around them. Of course you wouldn't know. One rough voice spoke rudely. We are Orium's powers after all. A more gentle one said. A pale green sprite landed on her shoulder before revealing the small fairy girl inside. Hi Orium. She cheered happily as the rest revealed themselves, each dressed in a variety of ways. Ah! Orium cried out, realizing something. You're the Shunshunrika. Aren't you? She remembered, a long time ago when a certain strawberry told her to make a wish on her precious present, she dreamed. In that dream, there was a field of flowers inhabited by 6 fairies. They told her they were watching over her, that they were with her, that they would protect her. Shuno. Ayam. Tsubaki. Began. Lily. Hinajiku. She cheered, wanting to hold each one to her chest after not seeing them for so long. It's so good to see you all again. Tatsuki could only watch in confusion. Wait, if you were with Orium all this time then where were you? She asked the flying spirits. That's easy. Shuno chirped, pointing at the now missing hairpins on Orium's head. We manifest ourselves from her hairpins. There was another pause of silence as Tatsuki digested the information. No expressions changed in this time. So magic wish-granting hairpins. Tatsuki summarized from a long-past conversation. Yep. Wish-granting hairpins. Shuno chirped. Orium was ecstatic. Yay. Wish-granting hairpins. She yelled, throwing her arms around her old friend. The hollow grew more and more furious. I will dash. Katanzan shun, I reject. Orium said with a cheery smile that felt surprisingly dark as Tsubaki silently split the monster in half that his master was pointing at. She turned to the monster with that same dark smile as she said in a chillingly sweet tone. Don't ruin the moment. The hollow faded into nothingness shortly after. Tatsuki felt a newfound respect and fear for her friend. But mostly, she was glad that Orium was safe, and now she could prove Ichigo wrong. She winced as the pain came back, which Orium noticed. Suten Kishun, I reject. She said, enveloping Tatsuki in a glowing shield and undoing the damage done. Now that's useful. Tatsuki admitted, testing her arms a little. She noticed Orium pouting at her and she knew what the girl wanted. Tatsuki sighed with a smile. I'm SOR dash, she couldn't say as Orium immediately hugged her friend fiercely. Now I can help protect you. Orium said, crying in joy a little. Tatsuki returned the hug in earnest. And we can both help Ichigo. If that's the way you feel then you should get moving. The girls heard a familiar voice yell out to them. They looked up to see Yoriuki walking toward the girls with a proud smile. You did good for your first time, but this is nothing for beginners like yourselves. She said pointing at the growing swarm as the hollows seemed to start converging on 2 places. If you really want to help, then drink these. She said before tossing the girls several water bottles. Those will help replenish your Reishi. And Tatsuki, here. She handed her student a pair of armored gauntlets. Those should help you with those thick skulls, and you should be able to shoot fireballs if Kisuk did everything right. The girls looked excited at the prospect of proving themselves to their boyfriend. Let's do this. They cheered before attempting to drink their own refreshments. But this isn't a game. Yoriuki said, gravely seriously. You have to be very careful out there. The girls looked at the noble with a sense of recognition of the danger they recently faced. If you slip, you could die, or get someone else hurt. Are you ready to risk that? She asked, making the girls question their resolve. They thought about how Ichigo must be out there, putting his life on the line to fight this infestation, and here they were, celebrating beating 1 hollow each. They swore to help Ichigo, and that's what they were going to do. They chugged their drinks fearlessly and felt themselves go back to 100%. Yuryuki smiled. Get to the park. We're watching your back. The girls ran off without another word. They should make things interesting. Someone said, finally making their presence known. Kisuke is already working on thinning the herd where he goes. And you guys? Yuryuki asked her companion. Staying under the radar. And helping where we can. He said, lazily. Ichigo has grown since the last time we've seen him. Maybe he can bring that Chad fella next time. We might be able to help him. He said as they continued to watch the gathering swarm and the growing tear in the sky. Back with Chad. He kept crushing skulls, blasting them to nothing, and overpowering dozens of hollows with no rest. The monsters only seemed to get stronger as more came up, and more intelligent. Chad was starting to feel the strain, the area around him was being torn apart by his blasts and the hollows' attacks. This is bad. He thought to himself, trying to reassess the situation. A hollow tried to swipe at him but he caught it and threw the corrupted soul around, smashing into other hollows before letting go, letting the force take them away. I'm getting closer and closer to my limit. A hollow with a bull mask charged at him, making Chad struggle against keeping the beast at bay. With a defiant roar, he headbutted the creature before slamming his empowered fist into its skull, wiping out several more hollows in the process. I could really use some help about now, he thought, as the horde showed no sign of decreasing. He was so focused on standing his ground, he did not notice the petite Shinigami's chant. Wrath of your claws. He heard the familiar voice and chant just in time to duck. Heido number 33. Sakasui. Rukia yelled as a torrent of blue fire blasted from her hands, clearing a number of hollows. She, again, cursed her weakness. If Ichigo didn't drain her powers, she could use her Shikai to help out tremendously. But she knew that would be insane in this situation. Where did all these hollows come from? They never did something like this before. Sato. You alright? She asked her ally. I'm grateful for the extra room to breathe, Rukia. He said getting up. Any idea what that tear in the sky is? He asked punching another hollow into oblivion. If I had to guess. She grunted, dodging hollows swinging at her while she slashed them. I'm not sure I want to be right. Where's Ichigo? She asked. At his sister's school. Chad grunting, holding another monster at bay. He wants to make sure they're safe. He smashed the hollow's skull before slamming his foot on another one. Can he hurry up? She asked, cleaving through another hollow. There is nothing good beyond that tear. She yelled out as the duo kept the hollows at bay. Karen and Yuzu. The twins waited, huddled close together behind the protection of the barrier Yuzu erected between themselves and the hollows drawn to them. A barrier designed to keep hollows out, but others could pass through. Karen took this chance to help out their mod soul bodyguard with Heido blasts. Yeah Lord. Mask of blood and flesh, all creation, flutter of wings, yeah who bears the name of man. Inferno and pandemonium, the sea barrier surges, march on to the south. Heido number 31. Shakkeiho. She yelled as a ball of red flames shot from her hand like a cannon, disintegrating another hollow while Kon continued to tear through the masses. He went through numerous modifications after he joined the Kurosaka family, particularly when it came to protecting the twins. Kon currently was a tall, lean, and ripped man-lion, with razor-sharp claws and strength to rival Chad's. The downside of this was that it only works when the girls were in immediate danger. Karen. Yuzu cried, trying to maintain the barrier as some hollows banged against it before being pushed back. Where's Ichii? Karen kept shooting off Kido blasts while trying to keep her sister calm. He'll be here. She yelled out, having full faith in her brother. Ichii promised to protect us, remember? She asked, trying to reassure herself as much as her sister. Suddenly she felt herself and her sister being pulled together as Kon seemed to grab them, just as he reverted back to that lion plushie. She locked eyes with Yuzu's in terror as a flash of glowing silver dropped in front of them directly at Kon's head. A silver rod strikes the five-fingered stone bed. Grits. They heard before being enveloped in darkness. They listened to the angered roars of the hollows before they heard the unmistakable tone of their protective brother. "Yeah, Lord. Mask of flesh and bone, flutter of wings, yeah, who bears the name of man. Truth and temperance, upon this sinless wall of dreams unleash but slightly the wrath of your claws." Heido number 33. Sakasui. They could feel the heat from Ichigo's Kido spell through the Quincy barrier only one other person could have done. The seal fell apart and before them stood the ones they were waiting for. Ichi Nii. Urayu Nii. They twins cried as they ran to their brother and cousin. Ichigo knelt down to better hug his precious sisters while Urayu opted for a reassuring pat on the head. All the while ignoring the scorched schoolyard behind them. "You two did great to hold out for this long," Ichigo said, giving them a congratulatory smile with the intent of calming their nerves. "But you should head home and let us handle the rest," Urayu said as Ichigo extracted the soul pill to swallow. Now that he was in soul form, it was time to clear out the hollows. Kon, now in Ichigo's body, grabbed the girls and made his way for their home. "You should have let Yuzu heal your hand a little," Ichigo said as Urayu looked at his bleeding hand. The rate of the hollows were increasing and his new bow was more than a little taxing on him. "You'll just have to pick up the slack then," Urayu said while readjusting his glasses. "Seems fitting since all you did was run while I covered you." "Don't worry." Ichigo turned to his ally, One Eye Black and Gold. "There will be no rest till they're all dead," he said before they disappeared in a burst of speed, their destination obvious. The empty park. The fight continued as the two defenders became more and more exhausted. Chad was breathing rather heavily with a few notable injuries on him, testing his endurance for the first time in a long time for the man. Rukia was faring no better as she did not have the same physical limit as her ally and her already weakened state wasn't leaving her too much room for error. The next wave was about to commence when they heard backup arrive. "Katanzan Shunai reject. Suten Kishunai reject." Orium yelled out as her healing shield enveloped her two friends, fixing their injuries, while Tatsuki was riding on top of Tsubaki's shield. Once she got close enough she jumped off the black sprite and began shooting fireballs at various hollows, each one burning away the corrupted soul. After Tatsuki disembarked, Tsubaki continued his attack and cleaved through many hollows as well. "Looks like we showed up just in time," Tatsuki said, standing to her full height after landing next to her allies. Orium sat above them on her defensive shield and sitting in a meditative pose, trying to focus her energies on the battle. "Here, drink these. They should replenish your Reishi." They gratefully took the drinks as the new arrivals held off the swarm for a bit. After consuming the potions, Chad fired multiple rapid blasts to the hollows while Rukia shot out more Kido spells. Then a sudden burst of blue flames erupted in the distance. "Ichigo's coming," Chad said casually, greatly relieved that his friend is finally ready. "TCH. It's about time," Tatsuki said, planning on giving her boyfriend the tongue lashing of a lifetime. Whether verbal or physical was up for debate. "How long before he gets here?" Rukia asked before being pushed to the ground by Sato. Heido number 32. Okazen. She heard as a massive blast of yellow energy obliterated many of the hollows, removing their forces by half. They looked up to see Ichigo shrinking his Zanpakuto back to the normal large katana he usually wields, smoke coming off his blade from the Kido spell. Next to him was Urayu, still bandaging up his hand. "You guys all right?" he asked, resting his blade on his shoulder. "They seem fine, Ichigo," Urayu said, preparing his bow for another onslaught. "Though it seems you owe Arisawa-san and Inu-san a couple of apologies." Ichigo noticed his girlfriends among the fighters. "Guess I do." But before that, he lifted his blade and swung two arcs with energy blasting off the edge. "We're going to kill every hollow here," he said before flaring his riot suit, making every hollow quiver in primal fear as an apex predator appeared before them. Before they could flee, a barrage of black arrows found their way into masks and bodies. Chad smirked and continued to fire multiple blasts from his fist to the densest groups of hollows. Tatsuki and Rukia swerved through the beasts, striking them down with sword swings and blasts of fire. Urayu joined Orium atop of her perch and struck down the beasts from a safe distance, and Ichigo cut down swaths of hollows down with every swing. That's when they finally noticed the tear finally opened, and with it the creature Rukia feared. The hollows sang a macabre song of praise to the titanic hollow coming. The Minos Grande. Ichigo. Urayu asked his companion as the towering black hollow came forward with its freakish, long-nosed mask. Yeah. The hybrid responded, glaring at the behemoth. Where are the other Soul Reapers? The Quincy asked. Ichigo looked at Rukia, who looked at her cell and just shrugged. Apparently proving the Quincy's point about them being late. Ichigo surmised. That's disappointing. Urayu said, walking toward the massive hollow. So, this is a Jillian. Biggest, dumbest, and weakest of the Minos Grande class. How droll. Ichigo said as he joined his cousin. You guys finish off the small fry. Ichigo shouted over his shoulder. We've got this. His friends were about to protest before hearing something like machine gun fire and the cracking of bones and skulls. Urahara's group had arrived. You heard him. The ex-captain said to the group. Let's get cracking. Closer to the Minos. So how should we do this? Ichigo asked his cousin as the Jillian devoured its surrounding hollows with a quick lash of its tongue. I can only think of one way. Ichigo looked at his cousin and saw a familiar glint in his eyes he hasn't seen for years. No. Ichigo quickly said. No way, not happening, we swore we would never do that again ever. He remembered the last time they did that particular thing, and he still regretted the decision to have done it. Ichigo, we don't have a choice. Urayu pleaded while the towering Minos drew closer to them. You know damn well why that technique is forbidden. Ichigo yelled at his cousin, refusing to yield. I will never forget, nor forgive myself, for that. Urayu glared back, remembering an old shame. That's why I've agonized over how to fix it. That's why I suggest it now. You mean? Ichigo asked, feeling slightly hopeful. Yes, I've made it so it doesn't have that ridiculous name and pose anymore. The Quincy declared proudly. Perfect. Ichigo met his allies' enthusiasm. Urayu held out his bow, horizontally. Grab on and manifest yours. Urayu said. Ichigo took hold of the black bow and worked to manifest his own. The bow doubled in size and length while pulsating with power. Now turn. They turned their hands so that their bows were now perpendicular to the connecting base between them, forming an H. Pull back the arrow. Ichigo guessed as they reached to the middle and pulled back a massive harpoon of their mixed reishi. And now. Heilig Ballist. They shouted and let the missile loose. The top half of the Jillian was blasted away completely. The remains dissipated as the two Quincy reflected on their victory. Yeah, much better than last time. Ichigo admitted as their spirit weapon dissolved. Man, that was embarrassing. Indeed. Urayu agreed. I'm glad my father never reminds me of it. Good for oh crap. Ichigo said as he saw a bright red light grow bigger as it came straight for them. Acting as fast as he could, he shoved his cousin out of the way and brought up his blade to block the oncoming blast. Ichigo what dash? Urayu watched as Ichigo was forced back a few yards from the Zero attack. What? Was there another Minos? He traced the blast back to its origin and saw a larger hollow, smaller than the Jillian but still huge, serving as the source of the blast. He turned back to Ichigo, trying desperately to think of a way to help his family, when he saw something weird. Some of the deflected energy of the Zero was being absorbed into Ichigo's blade, glowing with red and blue reishi as the blade turned black. I've had enough. Ichigo yelled, pushing back against the blast. Of this crap. The Zero ended and he swung his blade. For one day. The power he released overshadowed the Zero by a great margin, carving a trench in the ground with scorched earth and shattered glass. Tell Urahara I'm skipping training tomorrow. Ichigo said to Urayu before falling flat on his face. Yeah. Urayu responded, looking at the damage Ichigo caused, which surely killed whatever hollow that was. I'll do that. Atop a tower. It watched the final scenes play out before it. The display was as impressive as His Majesty predicted. However, it was unexpected that the Ishida boy would so willingly side with the Shinigami. Ichigo was definitely the greater subject of interest, however. Mission objective: Data retrieval, complete. The white-clad, masked figure said. Further research is recommended. It spoke, turning to a hole in the air. Returning to Silburn. It said, light reflecting of the gold armor as it returned to a world of shadows. Check the description for the links to the author.